A rancher thought he was just helping a lost child, but the truth was far more dangerous than he imagined. What started as a simple act of kindness would soon put him in the crosshairs of powerful enemies and force him to choose between peace and justice. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Arizona desert as John Wilson rode along the perimeter of his cattle ranch. The year was 1875, and for 15 years this rugged stretch of land had been his home. He wiped sweat from his brow, squinting against the harsh glare. His ranch, Whispering Pines, sat at the edge of Apache territory, a fact that kept most settlers away, but suited John just fine. He preferred the quiet of the frontier to the growing bustle of towns. The crack of a twig caught his attention. John pulled his horse to a stop, hand instinctively moving to his revolver. He scanned the brush carefully, years of frontier living having honed his senses. "Who's there?" he called out, voice steady. "Show yourself." After a moment's silence, the brush parted. A small figure emerged, a girl, no more than 12 years old, with dirt-streaked face and torn clothing. Her dark eyes watched him warily. She was clearly Apache, and clearly in trouble. "You all right, child?" John asked, dismounting slowly. The girl tensed but didn't run. She looked exhausted, dried blood visible on her arm. John knelt to appear less threatening. "My name's John Wilson. My ranch is nearby. You need help?" The girl remained silent, but her eyes darted behind her, scanning the horizon with unmistakable fear. "Someone after you?" John asked. The slight widening of her eyes confirmed his suspicion. "Well, I can't leave you out here. Come on," he offered. His canteen, which after a moment's hesitation, she accepted. When he gestured to his horse, she shook her head firmly. "Suit yourself," John shrugged. "But we'd better get moving." They walked in silence, the girl keeping a careful distance. John noticed how she moved light, deliberate steps despite her exhaustion. Back at the ranch, his housekeeper Maria looked up from the porch, surprise evident on her weathered face. "John Wilson, what have you brought home now?" she asked, eyeing the child. "Found her out by the eastern ridge," he explained. "She's hurt." Maria's expression softened. "Come inside, Nina. Let's get you cleaned up." The girl hesitated until John nodded encouragingly. "Maria will help you. You're safe here." Later, as Maria tended to the girl's wound, a shallow cut that looked worse than it was, John stood by the window, watching the horizon. "She say anything to you?" Maria shook her head. "Not a word. But she's terrified of something, that's for certain." "Or someone," John muttered. "I'll ride out tomorrow, see if I can find any sign of trouble." That night, as the girl slept in the spare room, John sat by the fire cleaning his rifle. The flames cast dancing shadows across the wooden floor as he considered the situation. Taking in an Apache child could bring complications he didn't need, especially with tensions still high between settlers and tribes. But something in the girl's eyes had spoken to him, a resilience he recognized. Dawn was just breaking when John woke to the sound of hoofbeats. He grabbed his rifle and moved quietly to the window. 3 riders approached, their silhouettes dark against the reddening sky. They weren't Apache. 2 white men and a Mexican, all heavily armed. "Maria," he called softly, "get the girl hidden." The men reined in their horses outside his cabin. Their leader, a man with a scar cutting across his left cheek, dismounted. "Morning," John called, stepping onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. "Something I can help you with?" "Looking for a runaway," Scar replied, eyes scanning the property. "Apache girl. Seen her?" "Haven't seen any Apache around here for weeks," John replied evenly. "What's your business with her?" The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. "She's valuable. Property. Belongs to a client of mine." John felt his jaw tighten. No such thing as human property anymore, friend. War settled that. "This is different business," Scar said. "Her father's an Apache chief. Client's willing to pay good money to have her delivered." "Kidnapping, you mean?" John stated flatly. The atmosphere shifted, tension crackling like static before a storm. The other men's hands drifted toward their weapons. "I suggest you keep riding," John said. "Nothing for you here." Scar studied him. For a long moment. "We'll be back, rancher, with more men. That girl's worth a small fortune." As they rode away, John knew he'd just made dangerous enemies. Inside, he found Maria with the girl in the root cellar. "You heard?" he asked up. Maria nodded grimly. "What will you do?" John looked at the girl, who stared back with a mixture of fear and determination. "What's your name?" he asked gently. For the first time she spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Nayeli." "Well, Nayeli," John said. "Seems we're in this together now." The following day, John saddled his horse before dawn. The cool morning air carried the scent of sage and dust as he checked his provisions, ammunition, food, water, and a small medical kit. Maria watched from the porch, her arms crossed tightly across her chest. "You're going to her people," she stated rather than asked. John nodded, securing his rifle to the saddle. "Have to. Those men will be back, and with more guns. Her father needs to know what's happening." "The Apache may not welcome you," Maria warned. "Especially not after the Army's campaigns." "I know the risk," John said quietly. He turned to where Nayeli stood in the doorway. "I need you to show me the way to your people." Nayeli stepped forward, eyes serious beyond her years. "My father is Chief Maka of the Tonto Apache. Our camp is 2 days' ride, hidden in the mountains. Can you guide me there?" She nodded. "But the bad men will follow." "Let me worry about that," John replied. He turned to Maria. "If we're not back in 5 days..." "I know," Maria interrupted. "Go to Fort Benton and find Lieutenant Parker. He still owes you for saving his hide last winter." John checked his pocket. "Watch a relic from his past life back east," and snapped it closed. "We leave in 10 minutes, Nayeli." As they rode out, John kept a careful eye on their back trail. Nayeli sat behind him, her small hands gripping his coat. They traveled north initially, though John knew that wasn't their ultimate direction. "We're laying a false trail," he explained. "Then we'll double back through the creek to hide our tracks." Nayeli nodded appreciatively. "You know Apache ways." "Learned a few things over the years," John replied. "Had to survive out here." By midday, they'd covered considerable ground, zigzagging through rocky terrain where their tracks would be harder to follow. During a brief rest, John studied the girl as she drank from his canteen. "How did those men get you?" he asked. Nayeli's expression darkened. "I was gathering herbs with my cousin. They attacked us, shot her... Her voice faltered. "I ran for 3 days." John's jaw tightened. "I'm sorry about your cousin." "Why would they want the chief's daughter?" "To force my father to surrender our lands," she said simply. "The white men found gold in our mountains." Understanding dawned on John. The old story greed driving men to terrible acts. He'd seen it before during his time as a Union soldier, and later as a marshal before he'd sought the solitude of ranching. "We should move," he said, standing. "Still have ground to cover before dark." They rode steadily through the afternoon, the landscape gradually changing as they entered more rugged territory. Just before sunset, they made camp in a sheltered canyon with high walls that would hide their small fire dot. As Nayeli helped gather wood, John caught her watching him curiously. "Why do you help me?" she asked finally. "Most white men fear Apache." John was silent for a moment, considering. "I judge people by their actions, not where they come from. And I've never had much patience for men who prey on children." "You had children?" she asked perceptively. A shadow crossed John's features. "A daughter. She'd be about your age now." "What happened?" "Scarlet fever took her and my wife, 6 years ago." The words were simple, but the pain behind them was evident. "That's when I came west." Nayeli nodded solemnly. "My mother died from the white man's sickness too." A shared understanding passed between them, transcending their different worlds. That night, as Nayeli slept wrapped in John's spare blanket, he kept watch, listening to the night sounds of the desert. Something troubled him. The search party had given up too easily. Men desperate enough to kidnap a chief's daughter wouldn't be deterred by a single rancher with a rifle. His instincts proved correct just before dawn, when the distinctive click of a hammer being cocked broke the pre-dawn silence. John reacted instantly, rolling away from their campsite seconds before gunfire erupted, bullets striking where he'd been sitting. "Nayeli, run!" he shouted, drawing his revolver and firing back toward the muzzle flashes. 4 men had them surrounded, Scar and his original companions, plus another. They'd tracked them despite John's precautions. "Just hand over the girl, Wilson," Scar called out. "No need for you to die over this." John ducked behind a boulder as bullets chipped away at the stone. "How'd you know my name?" he called back, mind racing. "We made inquiries," came the reply. "Seems you used to be somebody important back east. Now you're just in our way." John spotted Mazelli scrambling up the canyon wall. Smart girl. If she could reach the rim, she might escape. He needed to buy her time. "That reward must be something special for you boys to risk hanging," John shouted, then fired twice more, forcing them to take cover. "More than you'd make in 10 years, rancher." Scar laughed. "The mining company wants those Apache lands, and they don't care how they get them." John counted his remaining bullets, 4 in his revolver, plus his rifle with another 8 rounds. Not enough for a prolonged fight. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten when John heard it, a bird call. That wasn't quite right. He glanced up toward the canyon rim and saw multiple silhouettes against the lightning sky. The Apache had found them. A war cry split the air, followed by a volley of arrows raining down on Scar and his men. John seized the moment of confusion to break cover, firing his remaining bullets to drive the bounty hunters back. Scar managed to mount his horse, but the others weren't as fortunate. As Apache warriors descended into the canyon, the remaining bounty hunters were quickly overwhelmed. Tall Apache man approached John, bow still in hand. His fierce gaze softened slightly as Nayeli ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "Father," she said in Apache, then switched to English. "This man saved me." Chief Maka studied John with penetrating eyes. "You have my gratitude, John." "Wilson, my daughter says you fought for her when you had no reason to." John holstered his empty revolver. "I had reason enough." As the sun finally broke over the canyon rim, John realized he'd just been drawn into a conflict much larger than a single lost girl. The question now was what side he would choose in the coming storm. The Apache camp was hidden in a valley John never would have found without a guide. As they rode in, flanked by stern-faced warriors, curious eyes followed their progress. Women paused in their work, children stopped playing, and elders emerged from dwellings to observe the white man who had saved their chief's daughter. Chief Maka led John to his lodge, a larger wickiup set apart from the others. Inside, they sat around a small fire as Nayeli told her story in Apache, her father's expression growing darker with each word. When she finished, Maka turned to John. "My daughter says you risked your life for her, though she was a stranger." "To you, it was the right thing to do," John replied simply. "Few white men would say so." Maka studied him. "You were a soldier once," John nodded. "Union Army, then a marshal in Kansas for a time. Yet now you live alone, far from other settlers." It wasn't a question. "I prefer the quiet," John said, though both men knew it was only part of the truth. Maka was silent for a moment. "The men who took my daughter work for the Copper Ridge Mining Company. They seek our land because they have found copper and gold in the mountains. When they could not buy it, they tried to force us with soldiers. Now they try to take my daughter." "They'll try again," John warned. "Men like that don't give up easily." "When money's involved, I am aware," Maka said grimly. 4 days ago, they approached our camp under a white flag. Their leader, a man named Hollister, offered what he called a generous price for our land. When I refused, he said we would regret our decision. The chief's hand tightened around his knife. The next day, my daughter and her cousin were taken. John considered this information carefully. This Hollister, would he be working alone? Or with the territorial government's blessing? "The agent at the reservation claims no knowledge of these actions," Maka replied. "But his words mean little. The army has pushed us into smaller territories each season." A woman entered, bringing food and tea. John recognized the familiar scent of mesquite roasted rabbit and accepted the offering with thanks. As they ate, he observed the camp through the open doorway. About 40 people, including perhaps 15 warriors. Not enough to withstand a determined attack. "Your daughter mentioned gold," John said finally. "If that's true, more men will come, with or without government sanction," Maka nodded. We have already begun breaking camp. By tomorrow, the elders, children, and most women will have moved to join our cousins in the high mountains. And you? John asked, though he suspected the answer. I and my warriors will remain to ensure they travel safely, and to deal with these men who threaten our people. The chief's eyes held a fierce determination. But first, I would ask your help in a different matter. What kind of help? There is a man at Fort Benton, Captain James Miller. He has been fair with our people in the past. I would send a message explaining what has happened, but no Apache can approach the fort without risk of being shot. John understood the request. You want me to go to the fort as your messenger? Yes. If the army knows of this mining company's actions, they may stop them. If they do not know, they should be told that white men are provoking war on their own. It was a reasonable request, but John knew the risks. If I'm seen coming from your camp, I could be labeled an Indian sympathizer. That's dangerous in these parts. More dangerous than facing 4 armed men to save 1 Apache girl? Maka asked with the ghost of a smile. John conceded the point with a nod. I'll need to return to my ranch first. If I'm going to Fort Benton, Maria needs to know. My son, Dakota, will guide you by a safe path, Maka said. You will be at your ranch by nightfall. As John prepared to leave, Nayeli approached him, her earlier wariness replaced by quiet confidence. Will you come back? She asked. I gave my word, John replied. That still means something where I come from. She nodded solemnly. It means something to the Apache too. John followed Dakota, a young warrior about 20 years old, through a hidden trail that wound through the mountains. They traveled in companionable silence until midday, when they stopped to rest the horses. You fought well this morning, Dakota said unexpectedly. Most white men panic when outnumbered. Most men, period, John corrected. Fear does strange things to people. Dakota studied him. My sister says you lost your family. Is that why you are not afraid to die? The question caught John off guard. I'm plenty afraid to die, he admitted. But there are some things worth risking your life for. Like a child not your own? Like doing what's right, even when it's hard. John checked his saddle straps. Your sister is brave. She reminds me of my Emma. Your daughter? John nodded, unexpected emotion tightening his throat. Smart as a whip. And twice as stubborn. Never backed down from anything. They continued riding, making good time through terrain John would have found impassable without a guide. By late afternoon, they crested a rise, and John was surprised to see his ranch just a mile ahead. Your Apache paths are impressive, he commented. Dakota's expression remained impassive, but his eyes showed pride. We have traveled these lands for generations. Every stone and tree is known to us. As they approached the ranch, John noticed something wrong immediately. The front door stood open, and his cattle were scattered rather than penned. Wait here, he told Dakota, drawing his revolver. The young warrior ignored him, knocking an arrow to his bow. We approached together. They advanced cautiously. The ranch appeared deserted, but the signs of struggle were evident: overturned furniture, broken dishes. John's heart pounded as he called out, Maria? A weak voice answered from the bedroom. They found Maria on the floor, a gash on her forehead, but otherwise unharmed. 3 men, she gasped as John helped her to a chair. They came looking for you and the girl. When I told them nothing, they tore the place apart. Did they say anything? John asked, cleaning her wound. They said to tell you that Mr. Hollister wants to speak with you. They left an address in copper. Ridge, she handed him a crumpled paper. John, they said if you don't come by tomorrow sunset, they'll burn the ranch. John's expression hardened. Did they mention Fort Benton? Or the message I'm supposed to deliver? Maria shook her head, wincing at the movement. Dakota, who had been examining the men's tracks outside, returned. 4 horses. They left an hour ago, heading east. John made his decision. Change of plans. I'm going to Copper Ridge. This is a trap, Dakota warned. Almost certainly, John agreed. But if I don't show, they'll be back. And next time, they might do worse than rough up Maria. He quickly gathered supplies: ammunition, his father's old cavalry sword, and a small box from beneath a floorboard that he hadn't opened in years. What about the message to Fort Benton? Dakota asked. John thought for a moment, then retrieved paper and ink. He wrote quickly, detailing everything he'd learned about Hollister and the mining company's actions. Take this to Captain Miller. Tell him it's from Marshal John Wilson of Dodge City. Dakota's eyes widened slightly at the revelation of John's former title, but he took the letter without comment. As night fell, John prepared his horse for the ride to Copper Ridge. Maria, her head now bandaged, watched with concern. This isn't your fight, John, she said softly. It became my fight when they came to my home, he replied, checking his revolver one last time. And some fights you can't walk away from, no matter how much you might want to. The box from beneath the floorboard lay open on the table. Inside gleamed a silver marshal's badge, untouched for 6 years. After a moment's hesitation, John pinned it to his vest. Some debts could only be paid one way. Copper Ridge had sprung up almost overnight, like many mining towns in the territory. A year ago, it had been nothing but a few tents beside a creek. Now, false-fronted buildings lined a main street rutted by wagon wheels and horse traffic. Men in dusty work clothes mingled with hopeful prospectors, saloon girls, and the occasional well-dressed businessman. John rode in shortly after noon, the summer sun beating down mercilessly. He drew glances a stranger always did in towns like this, but the marshal's badge on his chest kept most eyes from lingering too long. He'd worn it deliberately, a calculated risk. A former lawman might be afforded certain courtesies, even in a rough town like this. The address Maria had been given belonged to a 2-story building with a painted sign, reading Copper Ridge Mining and Development Company. John tied his horse at the hitching post and surveyed the street, noting exits and potential trouble spots. Old habits that had kept him alive during his marshal days. Before entering, he checked his weapons one last time. 6 bullets in his revolver, another 6 in his belt, and the cavalry sword concealed beneath his long coat. Not enough if things went badly, but it would have to do. A bell jingled as he pushed open the door. Inside, a clerk looked up from his ledger, surprise registering at the sight of the badge. Can I help you, Marshal? I'm here to see Mr. Hollister, John said evenly. The clerk's eyes narrowed slightly. Do you have an appointment? He's expecting me. Name's Wilson, John Wilson. Recognition flickered across the clerk's face. One moment, sir. He disappeared through a door behind the desk. John used the opportunity to study the office maps of the territory lined the walls, with particular attention to the mountains where the Apache made their home. Red markings indicated mining claims, most clustered around what John recognized as Apache land. The door reopened, and the clerk gestured John through. Mr. Hollister will see you now. The inner office was well appointed, with expensive furniture. That seemed out of place in a frontier town. Behind a large oak desk sat a man in his 50s, silver-haired and expensively dressed. 2 men flanked him. One, John recognized as Scar from their previous encounter, now sporting a fresh bandage on his arm. The other was younger, with cold eyes and a cavalry revolver on his hip. Marshal Wilson, Hollister greeted him, not rising. Or is it just Rancher Wilson these days? I hear you've retired from enforcing the law. Some laws don't need a badge to enforce, John replied, remaining standing. Like those against kidnapping children. Hollister smiled thinly. Please sit. We're all civilized men here. I'll stand, thanks. John kept his right hand loose, ready to drop to his revolver if needed. You wanted to see me. I'm here. Direct. I appreciate that. Hollister leaned forward. You've involved yourself in a situation you don't fully understand, Mr. Wilson. The Apache girl. Nayeli, John interrupted. Yes, Nayeli, Hollister continued smoothly. Her father sits on land that could bring prosperity to this entire territory. Copper, gold, silver enough to employ hundreds, to build schools and churches. Progress, Mr. Wilson. That's what we represent. Funny way of showing it, kidnapping children. Hollister's expression hardened. Regrettable tactics, I admit. My men were overzealous, but the stakes are high. Chief Maka refuses to see reason, refuses to sell land he can't possibly use. Sometimes pressure must be applied. I've delivered your message to Fort Benton, John lied smoothly, watching Scar's reaction. The man shifted uncomfortably. confirming John's suspicion that the army knew nothing of Hollister's plans. Captain Miller was very interested to hear about your operation. Hollister's smile faltered momentarily. The army understands the importance of development. This territory can't remain wilderness forever. They also understand treaty law, John countered. And kidnapping a chief's daughter violates about a dozen federal statutes. The room grew tense as Hollister studied John, re-evaluating him. What exactly do you want, Wilson? I want you to leave the Apache alone. Find somewhere else to mine. Hollister laughed. Just like that? Walk away from millions and mineral rights because one washed-up lawman has a soft spot for Indians. That's right. And if I refuse this generous offer, John met his gaze steadily, then I'll be forced to make this official. Federal marshals take a dim view of companies that provoke Indian wars for profit. Hollister's facade of civility dropped. You're bluffing. You're alone, Wilson. No badge, at least not a current one, no backup. Just a rancher who should have minded his own business. Maybe, John acknowledged. But your clerk saw this badge. So did half the town as I rode in. If I disappear, there will be questions. Scar stepped forward, hand moving to his gun. Boss, let me handle this. No one would be surprised if an Indian sympathizer met a bad end out here. Hollister held up a hand, stopping him. Not yet, he turned back to John. I'm a reasonable man. I'll make you an offer, the same one I made Maka. $50,000 for your silence and cooperation. Help me convince the chief to sell, and you'll never have to work another day in your life. The amount was staggering more money than John had ever seen. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to imagine what he could do with such wealth. New start somewhere else, perhaps back east where memories of Emma and Sarah didn't haunt every corner. You're asking me to betray people who trusted me, John said finally. That's not for sale at any price. Hollister sighed, genuinely disappointed. A pity. Honor is such an expensive virtue these days. He nodded to his men. Escort Mr. Wilson out. Ensure he leaves town immediately. John tensed, prepared for a double cross, but Scar merely gestured toward the door. After you, Marshal. The street was quieter now, the afternoon heat having driven most indoors. As they reached John's horse, Scar spoke in a low voice. Hollister's not done with you. Men will come to your ranch tonight. I'd be gone if I were you. John studied him, surprised. Why tell me this? Scar touched his bandaged arm. The Apache could have killed me yesterday. They didn't. Figure that earns you one warning. As John mounted his horse, the younger gunman added, Doesn't mean we won't come for you tomorrow, though. I'll keep that in mind, John replied. Turning his horse toward the town's edge, he rode hard for an hour, then cut away from the main trail, following a route Dakota had shown him that would take him back to the Apache camp. The sun was low when he spotted riders on the horizon, at least 10 men, heading toward his ranch. Hollister hadn't waited for nightfall after all. John changed direction, pushing his horse to its limits. He needed to reach Maka before Hollister's men discovered the ranch empty and changed targets. The Apache were breaking camp, vulnerable while moving. Darkness had fallen by the time John reached the valley. To his relief, the camp was still there, though mostly dismantled. Warriors stood guard while the last families prepared to leave. Maka emerged from his lodge as John dismounted. You have returned sooner than expected. Hollister's men are coming, John explained quickly. At least 10 well armed. They know I warned you. The chief nodded, unsurprised. Dakota delivered your message to Fort Benton. Captain Miller sends word that he will investigate, but cannot move troops without orders. Typical, John muttered. How soon can your people be ready to move? We leave within the hour. The path through the mountains is narrow. We can defend it if necessary. John hesitated, then made his decision. I'm staying with you. This is partly my fight now. Maka clasped his arm in the warrior's greeting. Then we fight together, John. Wilson, as the Apache broke camp, John helped where he could. Nayeli found him securing supplies on a travois. You came back, she said simply. I said I would, he replied. She studied him with those wise beyond years eyes. What will you do when this is over? The question caught him off guard. For 6 years, he'd lived day to day, never planning beyond the next season. I don't know, he admitted. My ranch isn't safe anymore. Nayeli considered this. My father says a man who has lost his path must look to the stars to find his way again. John smiled despite the circumstances. Smart man, your father. Yes, she agreed solemnly. He also says that when the Great Spirit brings certain people into our lives, it is never without purpose. Before John could respond, a warning call came from the sentries. Riders approaching fast. Go with the others, John told her, drawing his revolver. I'll find you when it's over. As Nayeli hurried to join the departing families, John took position with Maka and his warriors at the valley's entrance. The narrow pass would force Hollister's men to approach in smaller numbers, evening the odds somewhat. They come earlier than expected, Maka observed, bow ready. Hollister's not a patient man, John replied. Checking his ammunition one last time, the first riders appeared at the valley's entrance, pulling up short when they spotted the defenders. Scar was among them, now leading the group. He raised a hand, signaling the others to halt. That's far enough, John called out. Turn back and no one needs to get hurt. Scar dismounted, walking forward alone. Hollister's offering one last chance, Wilson. Step aside, let us talk to the chief. So, you can pressure him too. John shook his head. Not happening. Then we have a problem, Scar said. Because we're not leaving without. The crack of a rifle shot interrupted him. One of Hollister's men fell from his saddle, and suddenly the night erupted in gunfire, but not from the Apache. Riders appeared on the ridge above uniformed men. Army soldiers, led by a figure John recognized even in the darkness. Captain James Miller, the officer he'd sent the message to. This is the United States Army. Miller's voice boomed across the valley. Drop your weapons immediately. Confusion spread through Hollister's men. Some raised their hands, others reached for guns, resulting in another volley of warning shots from the soldiers. Scar looked at John, understanding dawning. You weren't bluffing about Fort Benton. No, John agreed, I wasn't. As the soldiers took Hollister's men into custody, Captain Miller approached John and Maka. Marshal Wilson, he greeted John. Your message was most informative. Especially the part about a mining company attempting to provoke an Indian war for profit. Didn't think you'd respond so quickly, John admitted. Miller's expression was grim. Hollister isn't the only one with friends in high places. I've been watching him for months, suspecting something like this. Your letter gave me the evidence. I needed to act. He turned to Maka. Chief, you have my word that those responsible will face justice. As dawn broke over the mountains, John stood with Maka, watching the soldiers escort their prisoners away. What will you do now, John Wilson? The chief asked. John gazed toward the eastern horizon, where the first light illuminated the path. Ahead, for the first time in years, he felt something he'd thought long lost purpose. I think, he said slowly, it's time I stopped hiding from the world. Nayeli approached, carrying something wrapped in leather. My father says this belongs to you now. She handed him the bundle. Inside was a beautifully crafted knife with a turquoise handle. A warrior's knife, Maka explained. For a warrior's heart. John accepted the gift with deep gratitude. I'll treasure it. As he prepared to leave, Nayeli asked one last question. Will you visit us? John smiled, the weight of the past feeling lighter somehow. Count on it. Riding away from the Apache camp, John Wilson faced an uncertain future. His ranch might be waiting, or perhaps a return to the marshal's badge. Whatever path lay ahead, he wouldn't walk it alone anymore. Some wounds never fully heal, but in saving Nayeli, John had begun to save himself as well.